and good evening. I'm Erin Burnett. Out front tonight, the breaking news. We are standing by for a vote to break the filibuster that has been holding up President Biden's agenda. That vote is expected to take place tonight, this hour, on the Senate floor that you are seeing live. And that vote is expected to fail. This pivotal moment, like I said, expected to happen this hour, live in prime time, coming as President Biden just wrapped up a news conference for about 2 hours to mark 1 year in office.
Tomorrow will mark 1 year since I took office. It's been a year of challenges, but it's also been a year of enormous progress.
His presidency depends on if the American people listened to what he said over 2 hours and believed what he said about enormous progress. Because Biden today trying to reset his presidency with that live question and answer session. Because right now, polls show almost 2/3 of Americans think the United States is on the wrong track. That is the second worst percentage since they started tracking it during Jimmy Carter's presidency. And a recent Quinnipiac poll showed only 25% of independents approve of Biden's job as president. That was 50% nearly a year ago, cut in half. He's trying to reset with that press conference today. And this hour, we're going to talk a lot about what he said. He said a lot, from Ukraine to the Build Back Better bill to whether Kamala Harris will be on his reelection ticket. And of course, voting rights. And that is what we are waiting for as I speak live, that vote. And tonight, Biden acknowledging that key priority of voting rights faces an uphill battle.
It's going to be difficult. I make no bones about that. It's going to be difficult. But we're not there yet. We've not run out of options yet, and we'll see how this moves. And I'm confident that we can take the case to the American people that the people they should be voting for, who are going to oversee whether the elections, in fact, are legit or not, should not be those who are being put up by the Republicans to determine that they're going to be able to change the outcome of the election.
All right, as Biden was making his case, right, as he was saying they haven't run out of options, I want to show you what was happening at the exact same moment. Democratic Senator Joe Manchin, at the exact same moment, on the other side of your screen, was giving Biden's agenda a hard no. Look at the poster. You didn't need to listen to what he said. Quote, "The United States has never been able to end debate with a simple majority." Manchin putting up a sign to be sure that we all know he is not on board with changing the rules to pass Biden's bill. But for Biden tonight, he wanted people to look away from Manchin, from the blockade that he is facing from some in his own party, and to focus instead on the GOP.
I did not anticipate that there'd be such a stalwart effort to make sure that the most important thing was that President Biden didn't get anything done. Think about this. What are Republicans for? What are they for? Name me one thing they're for.
You may have a point, but it is not just about what Republicans are for. It's also about what Joe Biden's own party is not for. And that's what we're about to see play out on the Senate floor live this hour. Jeff Zeleny is out front live outside the White House to begin our coverage tonight. Jeff, you were there inside that 2-hour press conference. President Biden defending, making the argument that he has made progress and has accomplishments as he tries to turn around those poll numbers.
Aaron, he did, and he certainly has made accomplishments. There's no question about it. The vaccine rollout is, tremendously different than a year ago. There was that major infrastructure bill. There was the American Recovery Act. 6 million jobs have been created. Yes, accomplishments. But the question is, there are a string of setbacks that really have set back this White House, set back this administration. So this was a chance for the president to offer a bit of a reset or a turning the page. There was more of a sense of doubling down, with a few exceptions. I asked him about the competence of this government. That, of course, is one of the underlying factors in why so many Americans believe the country is on the wrong track. He defended the competence, but he did acknowledge that COVID testing should have been better. But then he said he intends to make some changes into the second year. He said he wants to get out of the White House more. He described himself as a president senator, that he wants to be, he knows he's, he has all these years in Washington been negotiating these deals. Now he knows that he has to be leading. So that has a very different role. But Aaron, for all the seasoning he had an experience coming into the White House, it struck me that he's still trying to get his footing as the leader of the country, commander-in-chief as well. A few missteps on Ukraine and Russia, but overall, it's unclear going forward what big changes he will make in terms of structural changes. He said he stands by his team here at the White House. And as you said, he talked much more about Republican opposition than Democratic opposition. And in this hour, we are going to see why it's that Democratic opposition and big expectations from Democrats that is actually his biggest barrier.
Yeah, certainly is. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Jeff. So I want to go now to Abby Phillip, anchor of Inside Politics Sunday, and Van Jones, former special advisor to President Obama. So, Van, obviously you've got the optics of Manchin and Biden speaking at the same moment about the same thing. One saying, let's go. The other saying, no, never, no way. And is there any way he possibly could? What do you think of what you saw from President Biden in the totality of that press conference that, he kept extending? He kept taking extra questions.
Well, look, you have to give him credit for being willing to stand there for 2 hours. Yeah. And, he took every question. But, I think that there's nothing that he can say right now that's going to turn things around on a dime. The numbers are what they are when it comes to inflation, when it comes to COVID, et cetera. I think what I came away with feeling was that, the problems this country faces are bigger than one guy can deal with. You have a Democratic Party that can't find a way to compromise with itself to help this president. You have a Republican Party that won't cooperate to help this president. And sometimes Biden can't communicate well enough to help himself. And so you're at a low point right now. I think the way forward is what he says. He's got to get some wins on the board, and he's got to get out there and make his case better. But listen, with the numbers being what they are, there's no way that one press conference was going to fix it anyway. You got to give him credit for being willing to stand there and face the fire and keep pushing forward. Right,
which is true, right? That he did take 2 hours of questions, right? It was going to be 90 minutes. At 90 minutes, he's like, how long do you want me to stay here? All right, I'll do another 20 minutes. Abby, but we're about to see this vote, right, in prime time. Senator Manchin today making it clear, right, as Joe Biden was speaking, where he stands, how this is going to go. And this is going to happen right in prime time this hour. We're awaiting it, the actual vote. This is not the optics, just to state the obvious, that President Biden wanted on the day that he's giving his 1 year in office press conference.
I think that perfectly encapsulates what has been so wrong with how this last week or two has gone for the Biden administration. President Biden is right in a lot of ways. He's accomplished quite a lot in his first year in office, a major COVID relief bill, a major bipartisan infrastructure bill, but that is overshadowed by a crisis of his own making, frankly. The White House set up a situation in which they knew they would fail on these voting rights bills. They knew that they would set up this intra-party fight with Manchin and Sinema, whose position on the filibuster has not changed in all the months that we've been discussing this. And yet they set this up anyway, in fact, to the point where it's coinciding with his 1 year anniversary in office. So, I mean, that just from a strategic perspective is not particularly smart, but I think it highlights the challenge that they have in trying to convince Americans that, hey, we did all of this stuff for you, things are going great, when the last thing on people's minds is the price of gas at the gas station, the price of food at the grocery store, and the legislative melees here in Washington. I think it's just a trifecta of really bad, issues for voters to take in right at this moment.
And Van, it comes, as Abby talks about, people are talking about competence in the administration, right? And there's been so much focus on the administration and who's doing what and who's going to remain doing what, right? And I have to say, the president was very clear today. One of the shortest but most clear exchanges he had was the one about running for re-election and Vice President Harris and his plans for 2024. Here it is.
You put Vice President Harris in charge of voting rights. Are you satisfied with her work on this issue? And can you guarantee, do you commit that she will be your running mate in 2024, provided that you run again?
Yes and yes.
Okay. You don't care to expand?
Pardon me?
Do you care to expand on voting?
No, there's no need to. I mean, I asked the question. She's going to be my running mate, number one. And number two, I did put her in charge. I think she's doing a good job.
Of course, I guess it depends. I don't know how you define a good job. Obviously, we're about to see that fail. So that's obviously strains credulity. But very clear there, Van, very clear.
Yeah.
On Kamala Harris.
Listen, and I appreciate that, and I think a lot of Democratic voters appreciate that. That's the one time that you don't want to give any fuzzy, foggy, let me tell you a long story answer. Clear and direct. They are a team. He's staying together. They're gonna fight forward. And look, I think that part of the reason that answer stood out so much is because some of the other answers were kind of foggy and meandering. I think you have to be honest that you can be a foggy, meandering president, say like Reagan near the end, if you're winning. But if you're foggy and meandering on key questions and you're also not winning, then you've got a real problem. And so I think the real challenge that you have is the numbers are out there that are bad. But this party has got to come together and start putting some wins on the board for this president. They either got to start, they're going to either hang together or they're going to hang separately in the fall.
So, Abby, it comes in the context of the polls, right? 38% of people think things are going well in the United States. 62% say things are going badly. Self-identified independents are the largest group in this country, and their approval of Biden has gone from 50% to 25% in the past year. Those are big things to turn around.
100%. I mean, look, voters feel like they are kind of on their last straw right now. I think this country and maybe even the world has been so strained by the pandemic. You didn't really get the sense in the press conference today that Biden really understood the gravity of how just being better than the last guy, doing better on vaccines is not enough to help people feel like they are truly getting through this pandemic. Parents struggling with kids constantly home from school because of outbreaks, because of, going virtual for a couple of days, all kinds of different reasons. They lose childcare. Maybe they can't afford childcare. Families, I think, are having a really hard time. And I think Biden tried to make a lot of explanations for why that might be the case. He says there are things on the grocery store shelves. He cited some statistics on that. But what was missing was a sense of, I feel what you are going through, and here's how we are going to resolve it. That's still, Biden can do that. He actually has empathy, but he didn't do it today. And it's not clear to me why they can't bridge that gap between what the numbers say and what people are actually feeling in their homes and in their pocketbook.
Which is usually something that he is stronger at. To your point, Van, one other thing stood out to me, and that was when the president was asked whether he believes the midterm elections could be fair if election reform bills, aren't passed. And I wanted to play part of that exchange.
If this isn't passed, do you still believe the upcoming election will be fairly conducted and its results will be legitimate?
Well, it all depends on whether or not we're able to make the case to the American people that some of this is being set up to try to alter the outcome of the election. No matter how hard they make it for minorities to vote, I think you're going to see them willing to stand in line and defy the attempt to keep them from being able to vote. I think you're going to see the people we're trying to keep from being able to show up, showing up and making the sacrifice that needs to be made in order to change the law back to what it should be. But it's going to be difficult.
Van, I have no interest in false equivalencies in any way. But when the first words out of your mouth are, well, it all depends, in a country already questioning the legitimacy of elections, that was a bit jarring.
Look, I think that was the opposite of the Kamala answer, where it was foggy and meandering. I think the point he was trying to make, which I hope he makes better in the future, is there's a difference between voter suppression, where you make it hard for people to vote. You fix that with longer lines. That's not the real problem. The problem is voter subversion. What he was trying to talk about was putting people in charge of counting the votes who might cheat. That is a big issue. And I think in this whole big voting rights conversation, things are getting all mixed and muddled, including in his answer. Right. I think we can fix suppression with long lines, but you can't fix subversion with long lines, because you got to make sure that people are counting the votes for fair. If he would focus on counting the votes fairly, I think he could have a bipartisan consensus, but I think he botched that answer pretty badly. Right.
Because the answer, of course, the question was about his voting bill, which he then answered a question about something else that's happening at the state level. All right. Thank you both so much. I really appreciate your thoughtfulness, your perspective. Thanks. And next, the Senate expected to vote any moment on moving forward with President Biden's voting rights legislation. So what is this going to look like? Live. Plus, breaking news, the Supreme Court clearing the way tonight for the January 6th Select Committee to get hundreds of documents that Trump had fought to keep secret. A member of that committee is out front. And the White House trying to clear up what Biden said tonight about Putin and Ukraine.
Russia will be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion.
Breaking news, the Senate set to vote moments from now in an effort to move the president's voting rights legislation forward. That vote will fail tonight, in part due to Democratic Senator Joe Manchin's continued refusal to kill or in any way alter the filibuster. And that is the only way to get Democrats to pass the bills with a simple majority.
I rise today to rebut what I believe is a grave misleading of the American people. For the last year, my Democratic colleagues have taken to the Senate floor cable news airwaves, pages of newspapers across the country, and to argue that repealing the filibuster is actually restoring the Senate to the vision of the Founding Fathers intended for this deliberate body. My friends, that is simply not true.
He couldn't be more clear. That speech from Manchin, as I said, at the very same moment that President Biden was giving his big one-year press conference, saying that he hasn't given up yet on voting rights legislation and that there are still avenues left to get it passed. The president also saying he hasn't given up on his Build Back Better spending plan, which is also stalled thanks to Senators Manchin and Sinema. The president conceding tonight that he may have to split that bill up in order to get any parts of it through. Manu Raju is out front on Capitol Hill. So, Manu, obviously, this is now a big night on the floor of the Senate. What can we see?
Yeah, we can expect to see failure for the central part of Joe Biden's agenda after months of trying to push this bill and making this the big focus in the initial weeks of the new year, that it'll finally end to a failure. Democrats are going to, in the next hour, have a vote to try to overcome a Republican-led filibuster. They're not going to get any Republican support, and they do need 10 to break that filibuster. And at that point, that's when Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, will try to move to change the Senate rules to impose what's known as a talking filibuster, requiring members to take to the floor. And once they're done talking, that's when the Senate could essentially move to pass this bill on a simple majority vote. But to do that, he has to change the rules first, which means that Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema have to be on board. And those two senators have been opposed for months to any efforts to reduce the 60-vote threshold to overcome a filibuster, which means that the efforts to change Senate rules will fail. Now, at the same time, Joe Biden has been making his case privately to senators. He came up here to Capitol Hill last week, urging them to get on board. These two senators, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, were not swayed, and they were also not swayed by his public comments at tonight's press conference, where he said that they do not pass these voting bills, that the elections could be viewed as, quote, illegitimate. Well, I just asked Joe Manchin about that, Aaron, and he said that we might have a little difference of opinion on that, and he's not the only one. Senator Ben Cardin, a close ally of the president, who will also vote with the president tonight, told me, I don't know if I'd use those terms. He said instead those state laws are troublesome.
Very interesting, Manu. We were just talking about that very point, right? How the president opened the door to that it could be illegitimate results if this bill doesn't pass. Thank you so much, Manu. And as we await that vote, I want to go now to Democratic Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, because she was there today. She went to the Senate chamber to watch the debate over voting rights. I so much appreciate your time. So you were there. You saw Senator Manchin. What did you make of that? And what do you make of the symbolism of Manchin and Biden speaking literally at the same time today?
Well, Aaron, first of all, thank you so very much for having me this evening. I think there's a real question of who will be the drum major for justice and equality tonight. When Senator Manchin spoke at the same time as the president, was he in the name of Dr. Martin Luther King, who died in the fight for social justice and voting rights? Is he going to be the drum major for justice and equality? I think the divide of the president and Senator Manchin was not one that created, for me, any tension. The president, I believe, has worked without ceasing for the American people. I think the question now has to be for the 50 Republicans and 2 of our friends, for them to be able to stand up for the Constitution over a frivolous and insignificant Senate rule. I want to ask Senator Manchin whether he understands that the compact that we've made as the American people with laws. It is a nation of laws. And that foundation is the Constitution. There is nothing in the Constitution that promotes, advocates, or even states the language of the filibuster. He's wrong. I want to give him time to change his mind, and Senator Sinema, and want to give him time to be a drum major for peace, justice, and equality.
So the president today, when he talked about this, framed part of the problem with his voting rights legislation in this way. I wanted to play it for you.
I think that's a problem that is my own making by not communicating as much as I should have. The fact is that there's a timing that is not of one's own choice. It's somewhat dictated by events that are happening in country and around the world as to what the focus is. But part of the problem is, as well, I have not been out in the community nearly enough.
You know, you got to give a person credit who is willing to talk about what the mistakes they may have made, okay? And he lists two there specifically, not communicating as much as I should have, and I have not been out in the community enough. Is that what you think went wrong, though?
Well, I want to absolutely give the president for being a straight-up guy. He is a person who speaks honestly and speaks from the heart. But let me be very clear. This is a legislative process. Thank the president for embracing both of these bills. And embracing Martin's legacy, and embracing Martin's family, and embracing John Robert Lewis. But this is a legislative process, and the Congressional Black Caucus, for one, has been an enormous and outstanding leader in engaging with all of the senators and all of our members in the House, and we voted successfully for both of those bills. I wrote Senator Manchin a 5-page letter and laid out my life story, the story of my constituents, the story of those of us in the South, those of us whose districts have already been written out because of oppressive, suppressive voting laws. I don't put myself up as the singular important aspect of this, but it is the American people. And we gave this process a very long time, but yet I am willing to give it more. I believe a rolling, talking filibuster is right. I believe Senator Manchin is wrong, and Senator Sinema is wrong. Am I angry at them? No. I want to engage with them. And as I engage with them, I want them to take the time to change their mind, because we cannot have elections, if you will, that are fair and reputable without these particular laws.
And obviously, look, I know, you've got to be hopeful. They've obviously made it clear every which way to Sunday that they aren't going to change their minds, but I understand that you're still pressing ahead. It leads me to this question, though, and that is that some Democrats, you're saying you're not angry with them, but others are, and they're open about it. And they're saying Senator Manchin, Senator Sinema should be primaried from the left for refusing to kill the filibuster to pass voting rights. Today, CNN stopped Senator Bernie Sanders and asked him whether he's open to openly backing primary opponents to Manchin and Sinema. One-word answer, yes. But Senator Mitt Romney defended them tonight, and I wanted to play what he said.
My colleagues did not criticize me or hang me out to dry when I've had a vote or two, particularly with regards to the impeachment of Donald Trump. They did not make my life difficult. They respected my vote of conscience. I'm surprised to see people talk about bringing a primary against Joe Manchin or Kyrsten Sinema.
So, Congressman, do you stand with Bernie Sanders? Would you support a primary challenge to those senators, or do you think Mitt Romney is more on the right path here?
Well, Aaron, you just opened a door for me to walk through. Senator Romney has no excuse for not supporting these legislative initiatives. There is great support in the state of Utah, I believe, in terms of Utah becoming a more open state, if you will, among many other states to support this legislation. 71% believe there should be early voting made easier. 69% believe that we should have mail-in and early vote. So
Senator Romney, of course, says no one from the White House has ever reached out to him to even talk about possibilities on this.
And the White House has clearly told me that is not accurate. When I say the White House, leaders have told me that is clearly not accurate. But I certainly would encourage anyone to reach out to all persons who want to seriously work. I want to answer your question directly. I want to take the time to focus on them as senators. and expect for them to be deliberative. I want them to understand what the Republican senator said in the 1800s. And he said, it's shameful in the Senate that the majority is subject to the tyranny of the minority. I would hope that Senator Manchin would look at that premise, that it is the minority that is terrorizing the majority, that wants to go forward on real voting rights laws to avoid what is happening, Aaron, in Texas, where they're throwing out under the new oppressive voting law ballots coming in that are mail-in ballots because they don't have a number. That is outrageous, unconstitutional, and is a shame on America. I plan to stand with Dr. King and John Robert Lewis and what has been done to move voting rights forward over the last decades. Let's ask the Senate tonight to not let this be the last time. Let them continue to debate, and let's get to it, and let's pass these bills, and let them signed by the President of the United States.
I so much appreciate your time, and thank you. And as we speak here, of course, we're awaiting those votes on the Senate floor. Next, the breaking news from the Supreme Court, deciding that Trump cannot keep hundreds of White House documents away from the January 6th Select Committee. It's a big victory for the committee, and a member will be with me next. And Biden predicting tonight that Russia will move in on Ukraine and that the type of incursion matters. Now the White House trying to clean that up. Breaking news, the Supreme Court clearing the way for the January 6th Select Committee to obtain former President Trump's White House records. It's a major blow to Trump. He has fought to keep secret more than 700 pages of those records. Some of the documents include White House visitors list, call logs. There's also handwritten notes from the former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows are included, correspondence about January 6th, documents alleging voter fraud. All of that is in here. Paula Reed is out front. So, Paula, what more can you tell us about this decision? I mean, this is something the former president had strenuously fought all the way to the Supreme Court.
Absolutely, Aaron. This is a big loss for Trump, made possible in part by 3 justices that he appointed to the high court. Now here, the Supreme Court has rejected his request to block the House Select Committee investigating January 6th from obtaining his White House records. Now, Aaron, he had tried to assert executive privilege over some of these documents, but the current president is the one with the power to protect materials from previous administrations. And President Biden, citing the extraordinary circumstances of January 6th, declined to assert privilege. Even today, the Chief Justice said, look, this is an unprecedented question. What do you do when a former president and a current president disagree about executive privilege? Now, Trump lost at the lower court. He lost at the appellate court, and here today at the Supreme Court, losing in an 8-1 decision. Notable, Aaron, Justice Clarence Thomas was the only justice to note a dissent, and all 3 of Trump's Supreme Court picks decided against him. Now, what does this mean for the committee? Well, now more than 700 pages of documents could potentially shed some light on the days leading up to January 6th and January 6th itself in terms of what was going on at the White House. Now, among these documents, as you noted, you have call logs, you have notes from top staffers. These materials could potentially really help the committee understand what was happening in the White House during this time.
All right, Paula, thank you very much. And the way it happened on the Supreme Court, I think is so important to note. Thank you. And I want to bring in now Democratic Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren of California, because she is a member of the January 6th committee. Congresswoman Lofgren, thanks for coming back. Obviously, this is a victory for your committee. The former president fought extremely hard to keep these records private. They went all the way to the Supreme Court, and they lost. Do you know how quickly you'll receive the documents?
Well, we have received some documents that were not covered by the injunction because of the way it was drafted already. That's just been received. And we expect to receive tranche 1, 2, and 3 promptly. I don't know that we have a deadline, but I think very promptly. And it's a very big deal for getting the truth out. I was glad to see that the court respected the decision made by the appellate court. As I think I said the last time I was with you, the former president failed to make his case. To get injunctive relief, you have to prove irreparable harm, and you have to prove a likelihood of prevailing at trial. He didn't even try to do that at the appellate court. And so this doesn't really resolve the issue of a dispute between a former president and a current president. He just didn't make his case. And so we're going to get these documents and we're going to go through them and help piece this picture together.
Well, I know, promptly obviously is important, and I know time is of the essence in your work.
Yeah.
I do know, Congresswoman, I understand that you were supposed to obtain 4 pages of Trump's White House documents from the National Archives about an hour ago. And did you receive those? And are you able to tell me anything about what's in them or how important they may be?
We did receive some material from the National Archives today. The staff is going through the material. The members have not yet had a chance to look at it. But yes, the material is starting to flow in.
So a source who's seen the subpoena that your committee issued to Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, says it demands information about his contacts with members of Congress and election officials. And Giuliani's lawyer told CNN that the subpoena, and I quote, is just political theater, that Giuliani is protected by executive privilege. He adds, when you are asking questions of the president's personal attorney, you're not going to get answers. Giuliani obviously appears willing to defy your subpoena. How important is he to you? Will you go to criminal contempt if he doesn't cooperate?
Well, I don't know. I don't want to predict what the committee will do, but he is an important figure in the plot leading up to the riot on the 6th. We have questions for him. The idea that his communications with other elected officials is somehow covered by executive privilege, I think is not correct. And we will do what we need to do to get the information from him that we deserve. We want to get all the facts. And, if he thought he was doing such a wonderful thing, why wouldn't he come forward and tell the truth to the committee?
So, and you talk about you want to get everything. And I know you've talked to 400 people. I understand that. But the subpoenas this week, one thing that really stood out to me, Congresswoman, you've got Eric Trump on there. You've got Kimberly Guilfoyle, the fiancée of Donald Trump Jr. on there. Donald Trump Jr., Ivanka Trump.
That was for the
phone
records, not the content, but just the
phone records
numbers
themselves. Yes, it's an important
Correct.
distinction, and thank you for making that. But what I want to know is, well, I guess, first of all, are there going to be more coming for those individuals? But also, what about the others? Donald Trump Jr., Ivanka Trump, Jared Kushner. We haven't heard about them in this capacity yet, even though we have heard some of the text messages that they sent that day.
Let me just say that we're looking at everything. I'm not in a position to say when requests for interviews or even subpoenas will be issued. That's something that the committee does as a group. However, nothing is off the table. We're going to get to the bottom of this entire plot.
All right. Well, Congresswoman, I appreciate your time. Thank you again for being with me.
You bet. Anytime.
All right. And the January 6th investigation, not the only legal setback Trump is facing tonight. CNN learning Manhattan's new district attorney, Alvin Bragg, has been briefed on the criminal investigation into the Trump organization that Cy Vance was running. Source telling our Kara Scannell that Bragg is now actively involved in the case. It comes as New York Attorney General Letitia James, who was working side by side with the DA, says her investigators have evidence of, quote, fraudulent or misleading statements from the Trump organization. They're revealing new details in a court filing, pushing for testimony from Donald Trump himself, along with his children, Ivanka and Don Jr. Out front now, Shan Wu, former federal prosecutor. And Shan, look, this is pretty significant. They're coming out and saying they've got a lot of the goods, that they found misleading numbers for 6 Trump properties from New York City all the way to Scotland. They're saying that they have proof that Trump reported his Trump Tower penthouse was almost 3 times bigger than it actually was, to increase the value by $200 million, then drop the value 2 years later. They're saying that they've got absolute proof that they lied about values to get loans, insurance, and other things, all of which would be fraudulent. This is civil, but they're also working, of course, with the Manhattan DA on criminal charges, possibly. Where do you see this going?
Well, I think this is further corroboration of what we've been hearing all along, which is that the Trump organization felt free to inflate and then deflate values of whenever it helped them. And that is fraudulent. The same evidence as to civil fraud would be the evidence for criminal fraud. The question is going to be for the criminal prosecutors to determine if they think overall the case is strong enough to meet that higher burden of proof in the criminal case as compared to the civil case. But the evidence is going to be the same, and it sounds like there is something there.
I mean, it certainly does from the way they're putting it out. You know, no fogginess or meandering in this. The court filing, it says the AG's office, they're basically zeroing in on a lot of things. But one of them, actually kind of a specific detail that stood out to me, file cabinets at the Trump organization that they say could be key because they note while Mr. Trump famously doesn't use email or a computer, he regularly generated handwritten documents. He had assistants who maintained files on his behalf and all of his, receiving of hard copy documents, and he used Post-it notes to communicate with employees. I can say, having known him over many of those years, that's true. He communicated in handwritten notes constantly, Post-it notes. It's how he did it. What do you think they're hoping to learn from these files? They're going to get everything.
Well, I think that's such an interesting point that you raise, Aaron, because that's a great distinction between a civil and a criminal case. With the civil case, even when they issue these subpoenas, the recipient still has a lot of discretion. They decide what's responsive to the subpoena. That's what we call it. And here it sounds like from the filing that they made a decision that there wasn't that much responsive in the filing cabinet. In a criminal case, by contrast, the prosecutor could just execute a search warrant and take the entire cabinet. So what they're looking for there would be corroboration of what Trump's state of mind would be in terms of contemporaneous notes, Post-its, anything like that might have been kept, and indications that he saw certain information as well, because they're looking to see what he, as well as other executives, would have known.
Yeah. All right, Shan, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And next, reaction tonight from the White House. A bit of a scramble here after President Biden spoke about a potential Russian invasion in Ukraine. Plus, what the president admits he could have done better when it comes to the pandemic.